When I was a kid, the world seemed really small, and I only saw myself in my house on my street.
I was raised to believe that Jesus was the Son of God, literally.
And that to get out of going to hell, you had to believe Jesus Christ was your Savior.
I used to love eating meat.
In my family, religion was the most important thing.
Because I had female sex characteristics, I was expected to do things that women are expected to do in our culture.
You kind of assume your parents' belief system. You kind of trust that they know what they're talking about. You adopt it as your own, naturally.
My dad was a really big meat eater because he hunted.
I wasn't confined in the 1950s Leave It to Beaver sense of being a woman, but I nonetheless was relegated to women's sports teams, to the assumption I was going to date men, to assumptions about my behavior.
All of my friends were asking their parents to pray with them to become a Christian, and I did the same thing.
When I was 10 years old, my father quit his job as a policeman. He sold our house, sold our cars, gave away the family dog, and flew us to Portugal to live in the most Catholic city of the world that he could find.
When I was 8 years old, in our Lutheran school, we got a little weekly reader thing, and it was showing these little Jewish kids making potato pancakes. I just questioned my teacher. I said something about, oh, these little kids, they're not going to heaven, and she admitted it. That's my earliest memory of my conscience being at odds with what I was told is right and wrong.
When we left the country, I went up into an airplane and I saw the world as a world, and me as a very, very small part in it. I think probably that was the first time I questioned the sanity of what I was being taught.
There would always be little things like when my dad, one year, I really wanted a 10-speed bike, and he went out and bought me one, and it was a really nice gesture, but he got the pink one with the girls' bar that you step through. And I hated that so much. I just didn't want to have a bike that was different from my guy friend's bike.
I was talking to a friend of mine in high school, and I remember regurgitating some line that I'd heard in church or from my parents about how gay people can go to counseling to become straight again. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I just thought it was so ridiculous, and I didn't understand why I even thought that.
My dad took me fishing, and which I used to love because I would sit by the river and we would, be together. And I caught this adorable fish, which I fell in love with. And then he took it and lopped its head off and cut its guts out. And I thought, that's awful. I'm never eating fish again.
I started to really realize that being so religious was tedious, that everything fun was a sin.
There's a balance. On one side is how much you're scared, and on the other side is how much you're frustrated. And one day, the frustration just gets to be too much, and that's what wins out.
I played it safe for a while.
I would say I probably wrestled with it for another 10 or 11 years.
I kept thinking, God, have I gone to communion? Have I gone to confession? Am I pure? If I died right now, would I go to heaven?
There was something that was really difficult for me to let go of.
It happened both all of a sudden and over many years. It got harder and harder to just feel that mismatch.
Eventually, I just came to the conclusion, would you just defer to a bully who asked for your lunch money, or would you advocate a business paying protection money to the mob? This is ultimately what I reduced religion down to, philosophically.
I think the breaking point for me was when I was about 16 and I really did need my parents and I really was in trouble. And their response was to throw me out of the house and say that I was no longer their daughter. And that was a horrible, horrible time in my life. But when I did leave the house, I actually began having my first independent thoughts.
Most people try to accommodate me. Even my family in Colombia, if they don't understand what I'm doing exactly, they always try to accommodate and are really nice.
The first person I told was my dad. And this is my dad, who's 72 years old and a New Englander and a Bush Republican. And he looks at me and he says, I've never wanted to be a woman, but I think if I did, I would have the surgery. You should do it. It's a great adventure.
I think my mom is disappointed. She started to develop a way more new age kind of Christianity where it's good people go to heaven. You're good, so you go to heaven.
I don't think that my parents could ever reconcile what they believe with what I believe, because they believe that I'm going to hell.
My dad, over time, came to accept who I was and to congratulate me for having my own mind. We don't talk very much about religion. We don't talk about politics because we don't see eye to eye. In fact, we see things pretty opposite. He's convinced that he's one of 2% of the people on the planet that really know the truth. And I'm convinced that I'm one of the 98% of the people on the planet that know the truth. So we kind of agree to disagree.
I know I'm still in the process of transition, but the differences that have made just top surgery, God, it makes my life so much better every day. So, it's worth it. It sucks. It costs a lot of money.
The thing that nurtured my independent thought was writing.
Playing music, painting. I look at those as forms of meditation. You lose sense of space and time.
All the things that I liked about church or I liked about the religion were things like singing or acting in the church plays or teaching Sunday school to kids. All of those things are things that I feel like gave meaning to my life apart from religion.
I found that I loved reading, and I found that I wanted to read the most subversive literature that there was. I wanted to read everything that my father forbade us to read. I wanted to know everything that he didn't believe in. Literature liberated me, and this book, I think, was the great pinnacle of my liberation.